this is the case of the Papin sisters, or Papin is probably more correct. Now, this is a case that took place in 1933 in Le Mans, France. And the Papin sisters were live-in maids for a family. And money too. So when Christine was 15, she left the orphanage and began working as a live-in maid. And the same went for the youngest girl, Leah. When she became old enough, she also began working as a live-in maid. Now, these Christine couldn't take it. She basically went psychotic, like literally. She tried to gouge out her own eyes. And she was like delusional. She kept crying for Leah, 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 Leah. They wound up putting her in a straitjacket. And eventually they decided, oh, let's just let them be together because this is just, we don't know what to do with Christine. So when they bring them together, according to the story, Christine throws she was just